My parents secretly emptied my $40,000 college fund for my brother. 10 years later, they asked me to pay for his wedding and called me selfish when I said no. $40,000 I spent years working to replace. Then they asked me to hand over more money to the same person it all went to the first time. My name is Owen Garrett. I'm 34 years old. When I was 18 years old, my parents emptied my college fund. $40,000. Gone. Every cent my family had been saving since I was 6 years old. They didn't tell me until 2 weeks before I was supposed to start university. They used it to pay off my older brother Derek's gambling debts. Derek was 22. He had a wife, a mortgage, a job he was about to lose, and a gambling problem he had been hiding from almost everyone. My parents found out, panicked, and made a decision. They decided that Derek's situation was an emergency. They decided that my future could wait. They sat me down at the kitchen table and told me the account was empty. They told me they'd had no choice. They told me Derek had needed it more. They told me I was smart. I would figure it out. I was 18 years old and I had just been handed a problem I had not created and told it was mine to solve. I figured it out. 2 years of community college while working full-time at a warehouse. A transfer to a state school. 5 years total instead of 4. $41,000 in student loans that I would not have had if the money my parents had saved for me had been there when I needed it. I graduated. I became a structural engineer. I spent the decade after graduation paying off those loans while building a career from scratch with no financial safety net and no parental assistance because there was nothing left to give. It had all gone to Derek. I paid off the last of my loans 6 months before my mother called. She wanted to talk about Derek's wedding. She wanted to know if I would contribute toward it. She suggested something in the range of $50,000. She said it would be a chance to heal old wounds. She said Derek had changed. She said family was about moving forward. I said no. My parents called me bitter. They said I was punishing Derek for something that happened a long time ago. Derek's fiancée sent me a message saying she was sorry I felt that way, as though my refusal were a matter of feelings rather than a straightforward response to the facts. I had one question for all of them. Has anyone ever paid back what was taken from my account? 10 years later, the answer was still no. This is the story of what happens when the people who were supposed to protect your future spend it on someone else's mistakes, and then ask you to keep giving as though none of it happened. I grew up in a mid-sized city in Central Oregon. My parents, Robert and Carol Garrett, were not wealthy, but they were responsible with money in most ways. My father worked as a city planner. My mother worked part-time as a bookkeeper until I was in middle school and then returned to full-time work at an accounting office. They were planners, organized, the kind of parents who opened savings accounts for their children when each child was born and contributed to them regularly. They talked about the college fund openly when I was growing up. Not constantly, but enough. Enough that I understood it was there, building year by year, a foundation for wherever I wanted to go next. Derek is 4 years older than me. By the time I was in high school, he was already out of the house and married to his wife Kayla, working at a manufacturing company outside the city. Derek has always been the kind of person who contains obvious contradictions. Genuinely likable, warm, funny. The kind of man who remembers your birthday and makes you feel seen when he gives you his full attention. Also someone who runs hot and cold with discipline. Someone who has good periods and bad periods, and in the bad periods makes choices that cost other people. The gambling had been going on for 2 years by the time my parents found out. Not casual gambling, not poker nights with friends. Serious money, serious frequency, the kind of gambling that operates like its own separate life hidden inside the regular one. Sports betting, mostly scaled up over time from amounts that were manageable to amounts that weren't. By the time it surfaced, he owed money in multiple directions. Some of it to actual people, informal loans from friends who had gotten uncomfortable enough to start asking. Some of it to credit accounts that had gone delinquent. The total came to something in the range of $40,000. Derek's job was at risk. His marriage was hanging by a thread. Kayla had found out and given him an ultimatum that she apparently meant. My parents found out because Derek told them. Not because he wanted help initially, but because the pressure had become something he couldn't carry alone anymore. He sat down with them and laid it out, and they absorbed it, and within 48 hours they had made a decision. They went into my college savings account. I did not know this was happening. I was 17, finishing my junior year of high school, focused on grades and applications and the particular excitement of someone who can almost see the next chapter of their life. The college fund had always been in the background, solid and assumed. It did not occur to me to check on it. Why would it? My parents were the ones managing it, and they were responsible with money, and it was my account. It was not, it turned out, protected in the way I had understood it to be. The account structure gave them access. They exercised that access. They withdrew the full balance over a period of about 6 weeks, moving money in increments that I imagine felt less catastrophic than a single large withdrawal. By the time I was a senior, the account was empty. I still had no idea. My acceptance came in early spring of my senior year. The engineering program at the University Upstate, a school with a strong department and a reputation I had spent 2 years researching and orienting myself toward. I was in. I was genuinely thrilled. I started thinking about dorms and course registration and the particular forward momentum of someone whose plan is coming together. 2 weeks before enrollment, my parents asked me to sit down. My father did most of the talking. He is not a man who struggles to find words in most situations, but that evening he struggled. He started and stopped twice before he got to the point. The account was empty. He explained what had happened. The full picture, Derek's debts, the extent of it, the decision they had made about where the money would go. My mother cried quietly while he talked. She said they were sorry. She said they had had no choice. She said Derek had needed it more urgently. She said I was capable and strong, and that she and my father were confident I would find another way. I remember sitting very still while my father talked. I remember the quality of the silence in the room after he stopped. Not the silence of shock exactly, more the silence of something reorganizing itself. The way a room looks different after all the furniture has been moved. I did not yell. I did not throw anything. I was 18 and I had been raised by people who valued composure, and composure was what I gave them, because falling apart in that kitchen was not going to put $40,000 back in the account. I asked 2 questions. The first was, is Derek going to pay this back? My father said they hoped so, that it was the plan, that once Derek got stable, repayment was absolutely part of the expectation. The second question was, when? My father said he wasn't sure of a specific timeline, but that it would happen. I nodded. I went to my room. I did not sleep that night. I lay on my bed and looked at the ceiling and did the math. The math was not complicated, just brutal. The university I had been accepted to cost roughly $22,000 per year in tuition and fees. I had the salary from my part-time job during high school, money I had saved for incidentals, books, the things a college fund does not cover. That would last a semester if I was careful. It would not replace $40,000. The community college 12 miles away cost $3,000 per year. That I could manage. I did the math on what 2 years at community college and then a transfer to the state school would cost in time, 1 extra year at minimum, and in money, loans, because even the state school had tuition that my job alone could not cover, and in the shape of a career that started a year later and a resume that said state school instead of the university. The differences were not catastrophic. I knew they were not catastrophic. An extra year of school and a different institution were things people managed all the time and went on to full, successful lives. I knew all of that at 18. What I also knew was that I would not have chosen them. Left to my own options, with the money that had been saved for me and that I had understood to be mine, I would have chosen differently. I would have had the right to choose differently. That right had been exercised for me by someone else without my knowledge. That was the thing I lay on my bed thinking about. Not the logistics, which were solvable. The thing underneath the logistics. By morning, I had the outline of a plan. I called the university and deferred my enrollment. I registered for the fall semester at the community college 12 miles away. I applied for a job at a warehouse distribution center that was hiring and that paid enough to cover my expenses if I was careful. I was careful. The first 2 years were hard in the specific, relentless way that hard things are when they are also simply daily life. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just the accumulation of early alarms and long days and the constant low-level calculation of someone managing on a tight margin. I went to class in the mornings, pre-calculus, then calculus, physics, introduction to engineering, English composition that I took seriously because my mother had always told me that engineers who could write had an advantage. I sat in classrooms full of students who were, in many cases, exactly where they expected to be. Taking a practical path, saving money, figuring things out. And I sat among them carrying something they didn't know about, the particular weight of someone who was not exactly where they expected to be. I worked afternoons and evenings at the warehouse, loading and unloading, inventory, the kind of physical work that is genuinely tiring in a way that makes studying afterward an act of discipline rather than choice. I did it because the warehouse paid more than most things I could get without a degree, and because the schedule had enough predictability that I could plan around it. Weekends were mostly for studying and laundry and the occasional hour of something that did not require output. I slept enough. I ate enough. I kept myself functional. I had friends from high school who had gone away to their universities and who I kept in contact with at the distance that develops when your daily lives look nothing alike. The texts and the occasional call. The updates on classes and campuses and the experiences that come with living away from home for the first time. I listened to those updates and said the right things and genuinely meant them. I was not resentful of my friends' situations. They had not done anything wrong. I did not tell most of them what had happened with my family. Not because I was ashamed exactly, but because it was not a story I had figured out how to tell yet. I was still inside it, still sorting out what it meant and what I was going to do with it. I told 2 people. Carter, my closest friend from high school, who I called one night about 3 months in when I was sitting in my car in the warehouse parking lot after a shift and something finally had to go somewhere. I told him the whole thing. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, in a flat and certain voice, "That's not okay, Owen. What they did is not okay." He did not try to explain it or contextualize it or find the generous reading of it. He just said it plainly, and I held on to that for a long time. And Bess, a woman in her late 20s who worked the same warehouse shift I did, and who had spent 4 years working her way through school before finishing her accounting degree. She had her own version of figuring it out, different in its specifics but recognizable in its texture. She did not offer sympathy so much as a kind of matter-of-fact acknowledgement. Yes, this is hard, yes, it is unfair, and yes, you will get through it, not because it is easy but because there is no other option and you are the type of person who handles things. She said that last part not as a compliment but as an observation, and I understood it as both. What I was carrying was a specific kind of grief. Not grief for a person, but grief for a version of my life that had been within reach and then taken. Grief for the particular gap between what I had been promised implicitly and over years and what had been delivered. The acceptance letter had been real. The program had been real. The version of myself walking onto that campus in September had felt real in a way that makes its absence a genuine loss. And underneath that grief, something harder and more lasting. The knowledge that my parents had made a deliberate choice, and in that choice they had ranked my future below my brother's present crisis. I understood at 18 that Derek's situation was serious. Gambling addiction is a real and damaging condition. My parents had been frightened for their older son and had acted from love. I did not doubt that then, and I do not doubt it now. What I also understood at 18 was that love is not the same as permission. That protecting one child by quietly emptying another child's future, without asking, without explaining, without even telling him until it was already done, is still a choice. A choice with a cost. And the person who paid that cost was me. And nobody had asked whether I was willing to. I was not asked. I was informed, after the fact. That distinction lives in me to this day. I transferred to the state school in my 3rd year. The engineering program there was well regarded, and the faculty in my department were engaged with their students in a way that made a genuine difference. The campus was larger than I expected it to be from the outside, full of the kind of energy that a large university generates, students moving between buildings with purpose, the daily texture of a place organized around learning. I grew to like it genuinely, not as the place I had originally chosen, but as a place that was mine. I took out loans to cover the gap between what I earned and what school cost. I was disciplined about the loans the same way I was disciplined about everything by that point, practically without drama, because managing the situation carefully was the only version of the situation that worked. I studied hard, not because I was afraid of failing, but because I was genuinely interested in the work. Structural engineering suited the part of my brain that wanted things to be correct, that found satisfaction in a calculation that held, in a design that did what it was supposed to do. I had a professor in my third year, Dr. Araujo, who talked about engineering as an act of public trust. The people in the buildings you design are trusting you with their safety, and they will never know your name. That framing stayed with me and still does. I graduated in 5 years total. Not 4, because the community college transfer added a year to the path, and there is no way to collapse that fact into something it was not. My graduation ceremony was in May of what would have been my 4th year of school at the original university, if the original plan had held. My parents came to the graduation. They were proud. My mother cried. My father gripped my shoulder and said he was proud of me in that particular way of his, the compressed declaration that carries more weight than longer sentences. I accepted all of it with genuine warmth because finishing was genuinely real. Whatever the path had cost, this was the end of one part of it and the beginning of something better. Derek was there. 2 years sober from gambling by that point, living something that looked like stability. He shook my hand and said I had done something real and that he was proud of me. He meant it, I believe that. Derek has never been dishonest with me in the ways that would have made things simpler, the ways that would have let me be simply angry without complication. He did not mention the money. Neither did I. Neither did my parents. The money had by then acquired the particular status that certain family subjects acquire when they are large enough and old enough and unresolved enough. A known shape in the room that everyone navigates around. The silence about it had its own edges. You could feel them in the careful adjustments people made in conversation, the slight recalibrations when something touched too close. Everyone knew. Nobody said anything. We had all, tacitly, decided this was how we were handling it. I let it stay there. I had a career to build and loans to begin paying and a life to go construct somewhere. Pulling the thread at graduation would not have given me back the $40,000 or the year of my life or the student debt. It would have given me a scene. I did not want the scene. I wanted the future. I moved to Portland for work, a structural engineering firm downtown that gave me genuinely good experience early in my career, a small enough team that I could see how everything fit together, large enough that there was real mentorship and meaningful projects. I was good at the work and I worked hard and I advanced at a pace I was proud of. By 26, I had my professional engineering license. By 28, I was leading my own project teams. I paid my loans every month without fail. Minimum payments first, then aggressively above minimum as my salary increased. I kept a spreadsheet, not obsessively, just practically, tracking the balance and the projected payoff date. I had calculated the exact date the loans would be fully retired at various payment levels, and I adjusted that date downward as I was able to put more toward them. The spreadsheet was not about anger. It was about the clean satisfaction of watching a number move towards zero. It moved towards zero. Portland became home in the real sense. Not just the city where I worked, but the city I chose. I built a community there over the years, colleagues who became friends, a neighborhood I knew, a routine that felt like mine. I owned a bicycle and used it constantly. I cooked most of my own meals because I genuinely liked to cook. I had a good life, built from nothing but my own labor and my own choices, and I appreciated it with a clarity I might not have had if it had come more easily. During those 10 years, I watched Derek from a distance. Updates came through my parents or through Kayla's occasional messages to the family group text. He relapsed twice. The first relapse happened when I was 24, about a year after my graduation. My parents handled it without involving me financially. I was both grateful for that and grimly unsurprised. There was nothing meaningful left to take from my column, and involving me would have required acknowledging what they had already taken, which was a conversation they showed no interest in having. The second relapse came when I was 28. Handled by my parents and by Kayla's family on her side, from what I understood. Again, I was informed via my mother's calls but not asked to contribute anything. Again, nobody mentioned the original $40,000. The thing about watching someone relapse twice after your family gave them $40,000 of your money to get stable the first time is that it reframes what the original decision actually was. My parents had presented it as a necessity. Derek needed it, there was no other option, the situation demanded it. What the subsequent years demonstrated was that the money had not solved the problem. It had bought time, a temporary relief of pressure. The problem itself required treatment and work and the particular internal reckoning that addiction eventually demands. Money could not do any of those things, could only delay their necessity. The $40,000 from my college fund in the final accounting bought Derek about 2 years before the next crisis. I am not making this point to diminish Derek's eventual recovery or to suggest the money was wasted in some abstract sense. He did the real work eventually and he did get better. I am making the point because the framing my parents used, urgency, necessity, no other choice, implied that what they were doing would solve the problem. It was the language of a one-time emergency. It was not, as it turned out, a one-time emergency, and I paid the permanent price for what was actually an installment in an ongoing situation. That is the thing I had to sit with during those 10 years of loan payments. Not just the original loss, but the specific irony of it. By 32, I was close to done. By 33, I was done. The final payment processed on a Thursday morning in October, and I sat at my desk and looked at the confirmation for a moment before I did anything else. 15 years. That was how long the financial consequence of one decision, made without my knowledge or consent, made when I was 17 and finishing high school and had no idea it was happening, had taken to fully work its way through my life. I closed the browser tab. I started work. 6 months later, my mother called. 6 months later, my mother called. She started warmly, asked about work, about Portland, about the woman I had been seeing for about a year. She has always been good at the warm opening. Then she got to what she actually wanted to say. Derek was engaged. His fiancée was a woman named Lindsay, and the wedding was being planned for the following summer, and the family was excited. And she wanted to know, carefully, delicately, with every word chosen, whether I might be willing to make a significant contribution to the wedding costs. She named $50,000. I was quiet for a moment. "Mom," I said, "I need to make sure I understand what you're asking." "I know it's a big ask," she said, "but you're doing well, and this would mean so much to the family. It would be a real gesture of coming together. I think it could help heal some things between you and Derek." "I'm not aware of anything between me and Derek that needs healing," I said. "Derek and I are fine. You've been distant. You know you have. I've been building my life in Portland, Mom. That's not the same as distance." "Owen." Her voice had shifted, softer. The register she uses when she wants something she suspects she will not get. "Derek has worked so hard to get to a good place. This wedding is a real milestone for him. For all of us. I just thought, has anyone paid back the money from my college account?" Silence. "That was a long time ago," she said finally. "I know how long ago it was. I spent 15 years dealing with the consequences of it. Has anyone paid it back?" "Derek has been through a lot, Owen. He's not in a position. Has anyone paid it back?" A longer silence this time. "No," she said quietly. "Not yet." "Then I'm not going to contribute $50,000 to his wedding." "Owen." "I'm not being bitter about the past, Mom. I'm being clear about the present. Nobody paid back what was taken from me. That is just a fact. And you are calling me and asking me to give more money to the same situation that already cost me my entire college fund and a decade of loan payments. I'm not going to do that." She tried several more angles over the next 20 minutes. That it was different now. That Derek had changed. That family was about forgiveness. That I had done so well, clearly it hadn't set me back that much. That I would regret not being generous on Derek's wedding day. That last one stung, not because it made me reconsider but because of the particular nerve it touched, the implication that my generosity was the variable, rather than my family's accountability. I told her I loved her. I told her I hoped Derek had a beautiful wedding. I told her I would not be contributing financially. We ended the call. The following days brought the expected responses. My father called and used the word selfish once, then caught himself and reframed it as concern that I was letting old hurt dictate my decisions. The effect was the same. Derek himself called. It was an uncomfortable conversation for both of us. He said he understood if I was still upset about what happened with the money. He said he had always felt bad about it. He said he was sorry, which was the first direct apology I had ever received from him on the subject and which I acknowledged genuinely, because I am not interested in withholding credit where credit is due. But he also said he hoped I could find a way to show up for him on this one. That the wedding mattered to him and to Lindsay. That it would mean a lot. I told him I was glad he was getting married and that I would be happy to celebrate with him. I told him I was not in a position to make a major financial contribution. He asked if it was about the money. I said yes, partly, and that it was also about the fact that the money had never been returned and had never seriously been discussed as something that would be returned, and that being asked to now give a larger sum, to the same family system that had quietly taken from me without asking was something I could not square. He was quiet for a while. I know I owe you, he said finally. I've always known that. Then you understand why I can't do this. Another pause. Yeah, he said. I think I do. That conversation, at least, felt like two adults talking honestly. Whatever happened after it with my parents, that conversation with Derek felt real. Lindsay's message came a few days later. Short, carefully worded. She was sorry I felt the way I did. She hoped I would reconsider. She said family was important to Derek and that she hoped I could be part of celebrating this chapter. I read it twice. Then I wrote back, briefly, that I wished them both well and that I would be there for the wedding as a guest and a brother, but that I would not be contributing financially to the costs. She did not respond after that. My parents' position hardened over the following weeks. My mother told extended family members that Owen was being difficult about the wedding. The characterization reached me through my aunt on my father's side, who called to hear my version and who, after she heard it, said, I had no idea about the college fund, Owen. I genuinely had no idea. That told me something. The college fund situation, the thing that had restructured my entire young adulthood, had apparently not been a story my parents had shared with the extended family. The version they had been telling was the wedding disagreement, not its context. I told my aunt the full context. She was quiet for a long time. Have they ever offered to pay you back? She asked. No, I said, and nobody has ever directly acknowledged that they should. She said she was sorry. She said it simply and without qualification, and I held on to that. I went to Derek's wedding. I want to be clear about why I went, because some people found it strange given everything. I went because Derek is my brother and his wedding was a real event in his life and my absence would have said something I did not want to say. My refusal to fund the wedding was about the money, about what the money meant and what asking me for it revealed. It was not about Derek himself or about his marriage to Lindsay, who I had met twice before the wedding and found to be a thoughtful, grounded person who seemed to genuinely steady Derek in the ways he had historically needed steadying. The wedding was held at a venue outside the city. A warm June evening, the light going golden in the way it does in Oregon in early summer, the kind of evening that does what it's supposed to do for an outdoor wedding. The ceremony was brief and sincere. Lindsay cried a little. Derek looked like someone who had arrived at something after a long trip and finally understood what it felt like to be somewhere good. I sat at a table with cousins I see rarely and liked seeing. I ate the meal. I drank one glass of wine slowly. I congratulated Derek in the receiving line and meant it, because I genuinely wished him the life he was attempting to build. I danced once with my aunt, who squeezed my arm and said nothing, and I understood everything she was not saying. My mother hugged me at some point during the evening. A long hug. She didn't say anything either. I hugged her back. At no point during the wedding weekend did my parents mention the college fund. At no point did Derek bring it up. We were, for the duration of the event, a family at a wedding. Warm and functional and not discussing the thing that was always present, the shape in the background of every conversation, the subject that had defined the last 16 years of my relationship with all of them. I drove home to Portland the next morning. It is a long drive, enough time to think through something properly. The highway opens up once you get north of the city, and there is a long stretch where the landscape does what it does and the thinking happens without much effort. What I thought about was the question of what I was going to do with all of it now. The wedding was over. The no had been said and maintained. The event had happened and I had been part of it and nothing terrible had occurred. The family was still the family. Derek and Lindsay were married. The college fund was still gone and still unpaid, and neither of those facts was going to change. So what now? The answer I arrived at, somewhere past the halfway point of that drive, was something close to acceptance. Not forgiveness in the version that requires the other party to have acknowledged anything. Not closure, which implies a door that fully shuts. Something simpler. The decision to stop waiting for the thing that was not coming. The money was not coming back. The apology that actually named the thing, the one that said we took from you without asking and it was wrong and we are genuinely sorry, that apology was not coming. The full acknowledgement from Derek, the one beyond his quiet "I know I owe you" on the phone, was probably not coming either, at least not in any time frame I could plan around. I was 34 years old. I had a career, a city, a relationship that was becoming something real. I had built all of it with my own hands from the circumstances I had actually been given rather than the ones I had expected to have. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, everything. I was not going to wait anymore for the people who had made the circumstances harder to acknowledge that they had made them harder. I was going to live in the life I had built and let the relationship with my family be what it could be, which was limited and surface maintained and real within those limits. That was what I decided on the drive home. I pulled into my parking spot in Portland in the early afternoon and sat in the car for a minute. Then I went upstairs and called Rachel and told her how the wedding had gone. She listened carefully, the way she does, asked the right questions, did not try to resolve things she couldn't resolve. That night I slept better than I had in months. What it had shown me was not a surprise, exactly. It confirmed something I had understood at 18 and spent the years since holding at arm's length, because holding it directly required a clarity about my parents that felt too large to fully sit with while I still needed to maintain the relationship. What it confirmed was this: when my parents faced a choice between Derek and me, they chose Derek. They did not choose him because they loved him more. I do not believe they loved me less. They chose him because Derek's crises were loud and visible and created immediate, undeniable pressure. And I was the one they believed could absorb the cost quietly. That is a specific kind of insight into how your family sees you. You are not valued less. You are, in a sense, trusted more, trusted to handle it, trusted to manage, trusted to not fall apart in ways that require intervention. The problem is that this trust operates as a one-way ratchet. It extracts from you and returns very little because your reliability is the whole point. If you were less reliable, you would be less useful as the one who absorbs things. Reliable people pay a tax. That is what I have come to understand across the years since I was 18. When you are the person who handles things, who does not collapse, who figures out the alternative path, who manages the consequences of other people's choices without requiring management yourself, the people around you quietly adjust their behavior to account for your reliability. They lean on it. They start to plan around it. They make decisions that assume you will absorb the results. And because you do absorb the results, the assumption is reinforced and the cycle runs again. My parents took $40,000 from my college account because they believed, correctly, that I would figure out another way. They were right. I did figure out another way. I figured it out for 15 years, across 2 additional schools and $41,000 in loans and a decade of aggressive repayment. What they did not weigh seriously or weighed and set aside was whether I should have had to. Whether the 18-year-old sitting in that kitchen deserved to have that choice made for him. Whether being capable of absorbing something is the same as consenting to absorb it. It is not the same thing. I was capable. I was not consulted. I have made peace with my parents in the way you make peace with something that cannot be undone. Not by pretending it did not happen or that it was acceptable. By accepting that it happened, that it was not acceptable, that the people responsible are people I love who made a decision I cannot respect, and that I am going to carry all three of those things simultaneously because that is what being in a family with complicated history actually looks like. I have not made peace with being asked to keep giving to the system that took from me. That is a different thing entirely. I am 34 years old now. My career is good. Portland is a city I genuinely love. The woman I was seeing when my mother called, whose name is Rachel, is now someone I am building a real life with. My finances are solid, my loans are gone, and the version of my future that I built from scratch, the one I built after the floor fell out at 18, is one I am genuinely proud of. I have a relationship with my parents. Not a close one. Cordial, maintained at a surface level, sustained by the particular effort that adult children sometimes make to keep something functional even when trust has been permanently damaged. My mother calls on birthdays and holidays. My father and I can talk about work and weather and sports without anything going badly. It is a relationship shaped around the thing we never discuss rather than through it. Derek and I are in occasional contact. The conversation we had during the wedding disagreement, the one where he said he knew he owed me and went quiet, opened something slightly. He texted me a few months ago, not about anything in particular. Just checking in. I texted back. It was brief and genuine in the way that brief things sometimes are. I have not received any money from Derek or my parents. There has been no offer, no plan, no acknowledgement beyond that one phone call where my mother confirmed the obvious fact that the debt remained unpaid. I do not spend energy waiting for it. What I spend energy on is the life I built, the one that exists precisely because I refused to stay collapsed when the foundation was pulled out from under me at 18. The life that is mine in every meaningful sense of the word, not handed to me, not funded by someone else's sacrifice, not built on money that belonged to anyone other than me. There is something I want to say directly to anyone who has had something taken from them by the people who were supposed to be protecting it. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to say no to the request that comes after the taking. You are allowed to decline to fund the celebration of the person who benefited from what was taken from you. You are allowed to do all of this without being bitter, without being punishing, without carrying a grudge. You are allowed to simply be a person who learned what their family was capable of and adjusted their behavior accordingly. Saying no is not bitterness. Bitterness is a feeling. No is a decision. The people who will call you bitter when you say no are, almost always, the people who benefited from you saying yes for too long. I said yes for 16 years. I said yes to being the capable one, the one who figured it out, the one who managed the consequences of other people's choices without complaint. I said yes to maintaining a relationship with a family that had never accounted for what they had done or made any gesture toward making it right. When my mother called and asked for $50,000 toward Derek's wedding, she was asking me to keep saying yes. I said no. My parents called it bitterness. I call it a boundary drawn 15 years too late, on behalf of an 18-year-old who was sitting at a kitchen table learning that his future had already been spent. That kid deserved better. He got what he got instead. He built something out of it. I'm proud of what he built. If you have ever had something taken from you by your own family, money, opportunity, trust, a future you had been promised, and then been asked to give more, leave a comment below. You are not alone in what it feels like to be the reliable one who pays the tax. And you are not wrong for eventually deciding the account is closed. If you believe that taking someone's future without asking and never making it right is not something that can just be erased with the word family, hit that like button and subscribe. Because moving forward is not the same as pretending nothing happened. And forgiveness, if it ever comes, belongs to the person who was wronged, not to the people demanding it. #They took my future.